I'm really, really pleased to be joined by Khalil Sayegh, someone who I've learned a tremendous amount from, who I admire deeply. Khalil is the director of the Agora Initiative, which is an organization that seeks to mobilize the public for a peaceful solution in Palestine and Israel. He's a political analyst based in Washington, D.C. He is originally from the Gaza Strip. Khalil, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me, Victor. Looking forward to our conversation as usual.
So, Khalil, I follow you on social media a lot, and sometimes I see how closely you are following what is now, I think, harder and harder to deny is a genocide
Hmm.
in Gaza. And yet I also see your tone, which is not just gentle, but I would say often generous and also often very self-critical when it comes to Palestinian politics and activism. And I sometimes think to myself, I don't think that if I were in your position, being from Gaza, your own father was killed. I don't think I would be able to maintain that tone. I don't know what the hell I would be thinking or doing, but I don't think I would be able to act the way you are. And so I just wonder if you can talk a little bit at a personal level, how you absorb this unending horror and handle it the way you do.
Sure, yeah. To start with, the reality is very harsh, and the reality is very difficult to witness every day. And as you just described, someone like myself who has not only lost his father and sister in Gaza, but also countless friends and relatives, looking and watching over what's going on is quite harsh. Just like a few hours ago, we've witnessed the destruction of a school in Hayat Tufah in Gaza, and literally the bodies were taken out, really burned alive, children and women burned alive in the school. Yesterday, we witnessed the murder of a Najjar family kids. The doctor at Nasser Hospital who was surprised that her kids were brought murdered by the Israeli military. So, in face of all of that, it is really difficult for someone like me to just be here from the outside and looking. There is a constant feeling of guilt that you're not there. There is constant feeling of hopelessness that whatever I do, it seems to not be stopping. And I've been trying over and over to do something about it, but it's not stopping. So that's how I'd like to start it, is that on the emotional level, how this is how I feel in a constant way. I am angry. I'm outraged. I feel like I scream. I sometimes, close the room or I'm in my car and I just find myself screaming for minutes or two. But when it comes to my conduct in public and when it comes to my social media interaction or my personal interaction beyond friends, like my professional interaction, because with friends you're more open and you're intimate, I tend to think twice before I say anything. And that's something I had to learn over the years. I wasn't always this way. I had to learn it over the years, and I think always constructively on what this could achieve and how would the other side, the West, that being, since we are in the West, can perceive that, and how it would change them or not. My perspective has always been that the idea that we can shame the other to feel sort of like pointing out to them and say, you are so racist and you shouldn't be racist, it doesn't really help, because once you say someone is racist, you already block the entire conversation. Instead of saying, the Americans always didn't care about Palestinians, whatever, my approach would be more, the Americans don't know enough and therefore don't care about what's happening to the Palestinians because they don't know. So I always approach it with this charity, if you wish, that if I teach enough, if I tell them enough, that things would change. That being said, I am not in denial of the reality that we have been saying what we are saying. We have been doing what we are doing. At the Agora Initiative, our very focus is to break down the story of Palestine in a very mainstream language, in a language that a conservative Christian could understand, an Orthodox Jew could understand, and your average white liberal or person of color was also liberal could understand. And still, we are not seeing change, and it is very frustrating. Yet, I don't see another solution. I don't see how anger and shouting at the other and calling the other's name could help change anything.
But do you ever wonder about? I've never been in your situation. So, Mohammed Al-Kurd has written this book about being a perfect victim. And
Mhm.
if I understand his argument partly is that he thinks that there is a cost to trying to be a perfect victim, right? To
Yeah.
containing one's anger, to trying to always take the higher road or something like this, never to scare people by showing that, and I wonder, do you worry that somehow having to put on this face while you're watching your people and even your own family and friends being killed, whether that has its own cost?
I don't think so. I tend to disagree with Muhammad deeply, and I've read his work. I mean, I would even argue more that Muhammad's position comes from privilege and not the other way around. People like myself are interested in stopping the genocide today. I have to stop it no matter what. If that will cost me my feelings, my emotion, how I would feel, and how I'm comfortable at college campus here, that's fine. I'm willing to compromise it. As Muhammad is more interested in how Palestinians in the diaspora generally feel. And he's not from the diaspora. He suffered. He had his own share. His home was stolen, etc. But so our family's life were stolen. So our homes were stolen, etc. So I understand. I empathize deeply with people like Muhammad. But to me, Palestinians cannot have the privilege of just caring about this emotional posture of how we have it inside. We care more about the impact. So if things are measured by their effects, in my point of view, then that's how I measure it. On perfect victimhood, I am not trying to be perfect victim, but I means I'm trying to be a rational person. Now, people like Muhammad would look at me and they would say, even rationality is a Western construct. And I would look back and say, no, it's actually an Arab construct in the same way. Philosophers like, Farabi to Ibn Sina to others, to Al-Ghazali have written about rationality. And it's not a Western concept in any sense. So that's, I think, how I differ with people like Muhammad. I think that rational and measured conversation is much better, and it's not perfect victimhood. But I would also turn the table and say, on the Zionist side, there is the same problem. Since October 7th have happened, the entire rationality, morality, conversation, etc. was shut down by them, and they became similar to Muhammad Qul. We don't care about your emotions. We don't care about how you feel. We don't care, etc. I just want to be a broad Zionist Jew, whatever. And the implication for that, whenever you try to talk to them about morality, they'll say, oh, there were babies beheaded, or there were babies killed, etc. All of which turns out not to be true to an extent, although there were atrocities that committed against the Israelis, etc. But that kind of moral panic that these people want us to be in, I don't think it brings any good outcome. That being said, I will conclude by saying, I don't dismiss Muhammad's notion of perfect victim completely. I don't think Palestinians should try to be perfect victim, but I reject the fact that Muhammad has been going, actually, he came after me and others by claiming that all of us, everyone is trying to be a perfect victim when we're not. We're just trying to be rational and reasonable in a way that the others could hear.
So, on the question of persuasion, what gives you your confidence that persuasion is possible? That if you present people information about the Palestinian experience, if you give people the chance to encounter Palestinian humanity, that it will change their minds, or beyond that, it will change their minds and get them to do something that would ultimately lead to change U.S. policy? Because I think, after more than a year and a half of this, there may be
Yeah.
some who are growing despairing of that.
And that's totally understandable. When I talked to, my friend who lost all her family, Hala, and she's just like shouting and saying, fuck everyone, basically, fuck the West, fuck the Americans, fuck Hamas, fuck everyone. Like that's a feeling of someone who lost all his family. I cannot look at them and say, listen, we gotta be persuasive or whatever. I really cannot, and I don't. I sometimes tell people from Gaza who are my family and friends, if it takes that I sacrifice my comfort and my emotions and the fact that I cannot shout like you in public, etc., I would do it. Now, how do I measure it? And why I know it's effective? I think I look around me and I assess what changed people's mind. I've spent time talking to Israelis when I was in Ramallah, and I've seen those who've changed and those who've not. I've been even to settlements actually, to talk to Israelis. That's how far I went with my mind to see. And I've been with many Jewish Americans here, like, yourself and others, people who you see in Israelism, and you see their process. And it's very clear that they had to encounter Palestinian humanity, and that's what changed them. I am not to see someone who was bullied into becoming pro Palestine. I'm yet to see someone who is called, oh, why don't you give me the right to hijack your planes or have random act of political violence that was persuasive to them. I haven't seen, maybe there are some minority out there that I haven't encountered, but as far as I know, I didn't see them.
This has been a free preview of my conversation. If you'd like to hear the rest and support my work, please consider subscribing at peterbeinart.substack.com.